It began on a warm afternoon, the kind of day when the air feels deceptively light, carrying no hint of the storm about to come. I was sitting in my office, surrounded by the quiet hum of success I had built with years of sacrifice. Every framed certificate on the wall, every award, every polished table was a reminder that I had started with nothing but an idea and turned it into a thriving business. That business wasn't just my livelihood. It was my identity, my sweat poured into brick and mortar, my name tied to every contract, every product, every decision. He came into my life with charm. The kind of man who shook your hand with a firm grip and looked you in the eyes as though he could see the very core of you. People liked him instantly. He had a smile that carried warmth and a presence that demanded attention. When he walked into a room, people shifted toward him as though pulled by an invisible string. I wasn't immune to it. I thought I had found not just a business associate but a friend, someone who saw the same vision I did. We met at a networking event, the type I usually hated but forced myself to attend because opportunities often hid in crowded rooms. He approached me casually, not as if he wanted something, but as if he already belonged in my circle. His words were easy, his laugh genuine. When he spoke about business, it wasn't like others who pushed or boasted. He seemed to understand. He echoed my own thoughts back to me, made me believe he shared my values. I didn't know it then, but he was studying me, mapping every weakness, every trust one was willing to hand over. Weeks turned into months, and our connection grew. He offered small favors that seemed harmless, introducing me to contacts, offering advice on suppliers, sharing insights on market trends. He never asked for much in return, at least not at first. When he did, it seemed natural, like the next step in a growing partnership. I thought I was lucky. I thought I had found someone who wanted to build with me. The deal came quietly. We had been discussing an expansion, a step that would put my company on the map in ways I had only dreamed about. He suggested a meeting with investors he claimed to know well. It felt like destiny, everything aligning at the right moment. We met in a polished office high above the city, the kind where the windows stretched from floor to ceiling and the view made you feel small but powerful. They listened as I spoke about my company, my vision, my plans. They nodded, asked sharp questions, and I answered with confidence. When I finished, he leaned forward, smiling, and that was when it happened. A handshake. That's all it was. Simple, quick, ordinary. I didn't realize then what it meant. He had positioned himself as the lead, the face of what I had built. In that single motion, he shifted ownership, redirected perception, and claimed the spotlight. Papers followed, contracts filled with fine print I had glanced over, trusting him to handle the details. By the time I understood what had happened, it was already too late. The business I had nurtured slipped from my hands like water through cupped palms. He took the investors, the suppliers, even some of my employees. He spun the story in his favor, painting himself as the visionary while I became just another name in the background. My logo remained, but my role vanished. My name was stripped from documents, my authority erased. People I had trusted for years began to look at me differently, some with pity, others with avoidance. I remember the moment it truly sank in, standing in the office that had once been mine, now bearing his presence. The desk I had chosen, the walls I had decorated, all now claimed by him. He greeted me with that same smile, the one that had once disarmed me. He even placed a hand on my shoulder as though to console me, though his eyes told me he had won. That handshake, the one I had thought was just a gesture of trust, had been the blade he used to cut me out. What hurt most wasn't the money, though the financial loss was devastating. It wasn't even the reputation, though watching it crumble was unbearable. It was the betrayal. I had given him trust, loyalty, belief. He had studied me, mirrored me, and in the end, stolen from me without lifting a single weapon. He hadn't needed force. Just a handshake, a signature, and my own blindness. I still think about it, about the moment his hand clasped mine, firm and steady, sealing my downfall. People say you should never mix trust with business, but I thought I was smarter than that. I thought I could see through deception. Now, every handshake feels heavier, every deal shadowed by suspicion. And somewhere out there, he walks freely, praised for his brilliance, admired for the empire he claims he built. But I know the truth. He didn't build it. He stole it. With a single handshake. The days that followed were a blur of disbelief and silence. I would wake up in the mornings expecting to head to the office, only to remember I had no office to go to anymore. My calendar, once packed with meetings and calls, was empty. The phone that used to ring with opportunities now sat dead, heavy with the silence of abandonment. People who once needed me, who once admired me, now avoided me, afraid my fall might rub off on them. I replayed everything in my mind, searching for the exact moment I could have stopped it. Maybe I should have read those contracts more carefully. Maybe I should have hired a better lawyer instead of trusting him to draft the agreements. Maybe I should have seen the way his eyes lingered on my plans, not with admiration but with calculation. But no amount of hindsight could change what had already happened. He had taken everything, and I had nothing left but the memories of what I had built. Nights were the worst. Sleep would come in fragments, broken by images of his grin, that handshake, the way he slid so easily into my world and claimed it as his own. I would sit in the dark, staring at old documents, business cards with my name on them, and wonder if I had been a fool all along. The bitterness was sharp, but beneath it, something else began to grow. A flicker of resolve. He had stolen my business, but he hadn't stolen my mind. He hadn't stolen the knowledge I carried, the years of experience, the understanding of the market, the connections I had nurtured. He might have taken the foundation I laid, but he couldn't erase the architect behind it. That thought, small at first, became a lifeline. I started small again. A cheap rented desk in a shared workspace, nothing like the office I had once commanded. My name was no longer on the glass door of a skyscraper, but it was written on every scrap of paper I worked on late into the night. I avoided the investors, the suppliers who had betrayed me, and found new ones who were hungrier, less polished, but more genuine. Slowly, I pieced together something different, not as grand, not as flashy, but mine. Still, revenge whispered to me. I told myself I was above it, that I was focused only on rebuilding, but the truth is, every step I took was shadowed by the thought of him. He had taken my trust and crushed it. He had walked away without a trace of guilt, parading what was mine as his. And deep inside, I wanted him to feel what I had felt, the sting of betrayal, the emptiness of loss. Opportunities began to appear. Whispers of cracks in his empire reached me. Overextended deals, suppliers dissatisfied with his arrogance, employees who remembered my leadership and resented his. He had built quickly, too quickly, and what rises fast often teeters on unstable ground. I didn't act at first. I simply watched, waiting. But when the right moment came, I moved. I spoke to those who had left his company, offered them a place in mine. I reached out to the investors who had soured on his empty promises, showing them a steadier hand. Piece by piece, I gathered the fragments he had discarded. And all the while, he never saw it coming, too blinded by his own reflection to notice the shadow of the man he had betrayed. The day I saw him again was almost poetic. We crossed paths at another networking event, years after that first fateful handshake. He still had the smile, the charm, but there was something hollow in his eyes now, a crack in the mask. When our eyes met, I extended my hand. He hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, before clasping it. This time, it was his grip that faltered, not mine. And in that moment I knew he had stolen my business, once with a single handshake. But now, I was the one who had rebuilt, stronger, wiser, unshakable. He might have taken my past, but I had taken back my future. His downfall didn't arrive with a crash. It came like a slow leak in the hull of a ship. From the outside, his empire still gleamed. Glass towers with his name etched in bold, glossy magazine spreads calling him a visionary, interviews where he paraded my ideas as his own. But beneath the shine, I could see the cracks widening. He had always been good at charm, but charm doesn't pay bills. It doesn't hold a company together when the foundation is built on deception. He overpromised to investors, sold dreams bigger than reality, And when those promises began to unravel, people noticed. Suppliers complained of unpaid invoices. Projects stalled. Employees who had once smiled under his leadership now whispered about mismanagement. His gift had been stealing, not building, and sooner or later, that truth was bound to show. I didn't need to lift a finger. All I did was step into the gaps he left behind. The employees who left him came to me, not because I offered more money, but because I offered stability and respect. Investors, wary of his empty bravado, turned their ears toward me, curious about the quiet competitor rising from the ashes. Slowly, carefully, I gave them what he never could: honesty, patience, and a plan that actually worked. Word spread. Not in loud headlines, but in whispers, the kind that matter most in business. He delivers. He doesn't exaggerate. You can trust him. And with every whisper, I reclaimed what he had stolen, not the company itself, but the reputation, the respect, the belief that had once defined me. The day the news finally broke, I sat in the same rented workspace where I had rebuilt my life. A headline blared across the screen: once praised business mogul faces collapse amid scandal. His investors had pulled out, lawsuits were circling, and his empire, my stolen empire, was crumbling. I read every line with a stillness I hadn't felt in years. But it wasn't triumph I felt. It wasn't joy. It was something heavier, quieter. He had destroyed me once, and now he was destroying himself. Part of me wanted to see him fall further, to stand in front of him and tell him that I had survived, that I was stronger than he ever imagined. Yet another part of me realized that his punishment had come not from me, but from his own greed. That was fitting. Weeks later, I heard he had disappeared from the spotlight. No more magazine covers, no more interviews, no more adoring crowds. Just silence where his name had once echoed. Some said he had fled abroad. Others claimed he was hiding, drowning in debts and lawsuits. I never sought him out. I didn't need to, because by then I had built something new. Not as grand as before, not yet, but real and mine. Each brick laid without deception, each handshake given with caution but also with clarity. I had learned the hardest lesson. Trust is a currency more valuable than money, and once spent on the wrong person, it can cost you everything. And so, when I finally stood once again in a boardroom filled with investors, employees, and clients who believed in me, not because of stolen words or charm, but because of proof, I realized the truth. He had stolen my business with a single handshake, yes. But in doing so, he had forced me to become sharper, wiser, unbreakable. In the end, he took what I had built, but I rebuilt it stronger. And this time, no handshake in the world could take it away from me.